On August 5, 2026, a single administrative decree from Beijing paralyzes a core pillar of American defense capability. The Chinese government restricts the export of critical drone components to the United States and blacklists 6 major American firms. In Washington, politicians express outrage. In Silicon Valley and defense manufacturing hubs, executives panic. For years, the United States military operated under a comforting illusion. The Pentagon launched the Blue UAS program, a strict protocol designed to purge Chinese-made drones from American military operations. Federal bans were signed, high-tech defense startups were funded with billions in venture capital. The American public was told the supply chain was secure. But beneath the polished chassis of American-made drones lies a terrifying vulnerability. You can ban a Chinese brand. You cannot easily replace the physics and economics of a Chinese supply chain. Open an approved American-manufactured military drone, and you will find lithium iron phosphate batteries forged in Shenzhen. You will find rare earth magnets refined in Baotou.
You will find brushless electric motors scaled to impossible cheapness by state-subsidized megafactories across Guangdong. Despite a decade of trade wars and aggressive decoupling rhetoric, the United States remains fundamentally dependent on its greatest geopolitical rival for the basic building blocks of modern autonomous warfare. China controls up to 90% of the global drone component market. A $300 commercial quadcopter outcompetes Western alternatives not through superior artificial intelligence, but through absolute dominance over raw materials and manufacturing scale. Now, the trap has sprung. The August embargo is not a mere tariff. It is a surgical strike on the physical architecture of American defense. When the components stop flowing, the assembly lines halt. The paradox is stark. America builds the software to command the sky, but China controls the hardware required to leave the ground. To understand how the world arrived at this choke point, you must look past the sleek marketing of autonomous weapons and examine the brutal, unglamorous reality of material science and industrial subsidies. For 2 decades, American technology companies chased high-margin software. Investors rewarded platforms, algorithms, and artificial intelligence. Manufacturing was viewed as a low-margin commodity, a dirty process best outsourced to the lowest bidder. China took the opposite approach. Beijing recognized early that whoever controls the physical components controls the future of the industry. Through aggressive state subsidies, strategic acquisitions, and a relentless focus on vertical integration, China built an unassailable fortress around the basic elements of robotics. Consider the neodymium magnet. Modern drone motors require permanent magnets made from rare earth elements to achieve the power-to-weight ratio necessary for flight. China does not just mine the majority of the world's rare earths, it utterly dominates the complex, toxic refining process required to turn those rocks into usable magnetic alloys.
When an American defense contractor needs a lightweight, high-torque motor for a surveillance drone, the global market offers only one viable origin point. The same dynamic governs power storage. The lithium iron phosphate battery has become the undisputed standard for commercial and tactical drones. It is stable, energy-dense, and highly reliable. Chinese firms spent a decade scaling battery production to a level that defies Western economic logic. They absorbed losses, crushed margins, and achieved a scale that makes domestic American production look like a boutique hobby. The United States government attempted to counter this reality with legislation. The Blue UAS initiative was supposed to be the shield. It created a curated list of approved drones for government use, explicitly forbidding the procurement of complete systems from Chinese giants like DJI. But the policy was a regulatory facade. It mandated American final assembly and American software, but it could not rewrite the realities of the global supply chain. The subcomponents, the wiring, the magnets, the motor stators, the battery cells still quietly flowed across the Pacific.
Defense startups imported these parts, assembled them in domestic facilities, loaded them with American flight control software, and sold them to the Pentagon at a massive premium. The supply chain was never severed. It was merely obscured by a layer of domestic packaging. The illusion held as long as Beijing was willing to keep selling the parts. But trade is a weapon, and dependency is a vulnerability waiting to be exploited. The anatomy of a choke point reveals itself in the frantic decisions of executives caught in the crossfire. Follow the trajectory of an American drone manufacturer like Skydio, a company celebrated for its cutting-edge autonomous navigation and trusted by military and law enforcement agencies. Skydio represents the pinnacle of American aerospace ingenuity. Their software can map complex environments in real time, allowing a drone to weave through forests and urban battlescapes without a human pilot. But software requires a physical vessel. When you operate a hardware startup in the United States, your primary adversary is not just rival engineering, it is unit economics. Sourcing components domestically is not merely expensive. For many specific parts, domestic sourcing is physically impossible. There is no American factory producing specialized micromotors at the volume and price point required to sustain a profitable production line. The incentive structure of modern capitalism forces even the most patriotic defense contractors into the arms of Chinese suppliers. Investors demand profit margins. The Pentagon demands cost-effective procurement.
To satisfy both, American companies must rely on the vast, subsidized ecosystem of Shenzhen. This ecosystem is a marvel of human organization. In a single district, a manufacturer can source precision-molded plastics, custom-wound electric motors, and high-density battery packs, all delivered within hours. This geographic concentration creates a gravitational pull that no Western company can escape. The Chinese drone giant DJI leveraged this exact ecosystem to capture over 70% of the global commercial market. But DJI is merely the most visible apex of a massive, submerged pyramid of suppliers. These nameless factories produce the lifeblood of the global drone industry. For years, Beijing watched as American policymakers boasted about securing their supply chains through import bans on finished goods. Chinese strategists understood the math. They knew that the American Blue UAS program was a paper tiger, reliant on the very infrastructure it sought to exclude. The dynamic created a bizarre geopolitical dance.
The United States loudly sanctioned Chinese tech firms, while quietly granting waivers to defense contractors who could not find alternative sources for critical parts. It was a relationship built on mutual deception. America pretended it was independent, and China pretended it was just a neutral supplier. But beneath the surface, a trap was being set. The balance of power was never determined by who wrote the best code. It was determined by who owned the factories, who refined the rare earths, and who could afford to absorb the brutal costs of physical manufacturing. The executives in Silicon Valley believed they were leading a technological revolution. In reality, they were building a massive dependency on a foreign power, one battery cell at a time. Then the music stops. On August 5, 2026, the hypothetical scenarios discussed in Pentagon war games become immediate, operational reality. Beijing announces sweeping restrictions on the export of specific drone components, citing national security and retaliation against American tech embargoes. The blacklist specifically targets the crucial nodes of the supply chain: high-performance batteries, specialized motors, and the rare earth metals required to build them. The impact is instantaneous and devastating. The embargo does not arrive with a military strike. It arrives with silent cargo ships anchored in port and denied export licenses in Chinese customs offices. Within days, American drone assembly lines begin to starve. A drone requires hundreds of distinct components to fly. If you lack just one specialized motor stator or one lithium battery pack, you do not have a drone. You have an expensive, useless paperweight. Companies that spent millions securing Pentagon contracts suddenly find themselves unable to deliver a single unit. The crisis exposes the fatal flaw in the American strategy of technological decoupling. For years, Washington utilized the Entity List to starve Chinese companies of advanced American semiconductors. The strategy assumed that America held the ultimate leverage because it controlled the highest end of the technology stack. But Beijing's counterstrike reveals a different kind of leverage. You cannot run an advanced AI targeting model if the drone cannot physically take off. The embargo weaponizes the mundane.
It transforms basic industrial components into strategic assets. Behind closed doors, emergency meetings are convened across the defense sector. The scramble to find alternative suppliers borders on panic. Procurement officers scour the globe for non-Chinese lithium iron phosphate batteries that meet military specifications. They look to South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. But the global market is entirely warped by Chinese dominance. Alternative suppliers lack the capacity to instantly replace the massive volume previously imported from Shenzhen. Expanding a battery factory takes years of capital investment, environmental permitting, and complex engineering. You cannot build a rare earth refinery overnight. The physical world moves at a glacial pace compared to the speed of software. The reality of the August blacklist is a brutal lesson in vertical integration. China spent 2 decades and billions of dollars building an end-to-end supply chain, from the raw ore pulled from the earth to the final assembled product. The United States spent the same period outsourcing its industrial base to maximize shareholder value. The cost of that optimization is now coming due. American defense contractors are forced to issue force majeure notices to the government. The production of critical surveillance and tactical drones drops to a fraction of its former capacity. In Ukraine, in the Middle East, and across the Pacific, commanders face the sudden realization that their supply of cheap, disposable tactical drones is rapidly drying up. The strategic calculus of modern warfare, which increasingly relies on overwhelming swarms of inexpensive autonomous vehicles, is suddenly paralyzed by a shortage of basic hardware. The Pentagon launches emergency funding initiatives, pouring millions into domestic manufacturing grants. Startups pivot to promise fully American-made components.
But these are desperate, long-term plays. Building a domestic industrial base capable of matching Chinese prices and volumes is a project measured in decades, not months. The embargo creates a terrifying window of vulnerability. For the next several years, the United States military will be fundamentally constrained by a shortage of the very tools it considers essential for future conflicts. The August announcement proves that tariffs and software bans are merely performative politics. True power lies in the physical control of the supply chain. When a rival nation can ground your drone fleet simply by withholding a shipment of magnets, the concept of national security is exposed as a hollow shell.
The August drone embargo shatters a fundamental myth of the modern American economy. For a generation, Western institutions operated on a singular philosophy: software eats the world. The belief was that value, power, and security resided in code, data, and intellectual property. The physical world, the mining, the smelting, the manufacturing, the assembly, was treated as a legacy burden, a low-value task to be managed by offshore contractors. But hardware has a memory, and physics does not care about algorithms. The crisis of 2026 demonstrates that the foundation of the digital age is entirely physical. You cannot abstract away a lithium battery. You cannot code your way out of a rare earth magnet shortage. When a nation surrenders its industrial base, it surrenders its sovereignty, outsourcing its physical survival to the very rivals it seeks to contain. The Blacklist reveals the true architecture of global power. It is not built on silicon alone, but on the unglamorous mastery of raw materials and mass production. The United States spent billions attempting to secure its digital borders while leaving its physical supply chains entirely exposed.
Now, the American defense apparatus is trapped in a painful, expensive race against time, trying to rebuild factories that were dismantled decades ago. The factories will eventually be built, the capital will be deployed, but the delay leaves a permanent scar on the illusion of American technological supremacy. As military strategists stare at empty warehouses and stalled assembly lines, the drone crisis serves as a grim preview of a divided world. If the building blocks of autonomous flight can be weaponized with a single regulatory decree, every piece of modern infrastructure is vulnerable. The hardware dictates the terms of survival. As the dust settles on the broken supply chains of August, one haunting question remains. When the next geopolitical crisis erupts, which mundane, forgotten component will paralyze the world next?